Hi, Sophie.
Hey, Finn.
Hi, everyone.
Hey,
And welcome,
everyone.
welcome to the Snack Covenant
even
episode
know
291.
That's how I sounded when you did impressions of me, and you still do.
And it's gone from, I'm so smart. Now it's like, I'm Sophie, I'm so smart.
It's my universal impression. It's very versatile. So, Sophie,
Mm-hmm.
you've been here for a year,
That's true, that's true.
and it's time for your annual review.
What are the odds that it's today?
And a few members of the Snack Covenant had some questions for you.
Oh, okay. So it's like an interesting kind of review process where it's coming from the audience.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
In the Snack Covenant, we're always like pushing boundaries and
Yeah, that's true,
doing new
that's true.
things.
That's true, that's why we're so popular.
Look, one piano guitar appears. People are going to be really impressed. So, could you please introduce yourself to anybody who's new to the channel?
Hi, if you came on board for that Elden Ring explanation video we did, that was me. And that was the whiteboard, which we still haven't moved, so I just hung a flag over it. And if this is literally the first video you've seen, I'm Sophie, I'm a doctor, and Sin is my co-host slash bestie life partner. So, yeah, so we're just, we thought we would make, we don't usually talk about this, we thought we would make one. We have a lot of trans and, like, LGBTQ listeners, so, yeah.
Awesome. Thank you, Sophie.
Thank you, Sin.
So, first, let's look at the Twitter questions.
Notorious trans-friendly platform Twitter.
Goldtooth is asking,
Oh, okay.
Sophie, who on YouTube are you following to get your makeup on point?
I follow Michaela, but she's like so many skill levels above me I would never even try.
Oh, Michaela's so good.
She is, yeah.
Well, thank you, Sophie. Thank you, Goldtooth.
Thank you, Goldie.
Jamie Vinheim is asking, Sophie, if you never had gotten deeper into Bloodborne and why
Yeah.
its themes used to bother you, how different do you think your journey with gender would have been?
I think something else would have bothered me. Is the best answer because, like, a lot of things had bothered me, and I'd always sort of like reacted badly to them. And what like made Bloodborne kind of integral to that is that you made me talk about it nonstop for several years. It was like exposure therapy.
Oh, well, I did get a bachelor in psychology, so
That's true.
you're welcome.
Yeah.
So now, let's move on to the questions from youtube.com/Sinclair Community tab. X is asking about the general state of trans rights in Australia, if you're comfortable talking about it.
I can try. So the laws in Australia differ from state to state like they would anywhere else. And where I am, like my specific state, I'm lucky because I'm in a state that's a lot more like open to it. I'm in probably the most like sort of like liberal progressive area of the country. So like if you remember back to that first video we did, like I was able to show like I have like amended birth certificate and amended ID and everything. And that was just something that I it cost money and took time, obviously. But it was relatively painless. Because it was basically just I had to fill out a lot of forms, I had to send them off, I get them witnessed and everything, get them signed by different people to do it. But like there are places where you have to go through this enormous like enormous sort of process, like going to like court and stuff and like being medically examined and all this shit to do that. And luckily that didn't happen to me. And like my partner, who's also trans, she has a birth certificate from somewhere else. And because that's where her birth certificate was issued, it's much, much harder for her to get her like ID changed. Yeah, so like the thing about it is like it's just this big maze of like legal sort of like constructs you have to navigate. And what we have here is like another example is like in the UK, you have to provide evidence that you've quite lived as a certain gender for a certain amount of time. And that's not something that like we have to do here where I am. But like I know that that involves like you basically have to submit a folio of evidence. You know, like you've used this name on these occasions, like here you are as his identity in these occasions, and you have to kind of get that like run that by a court and stuff, and like so I'm quite lucky where I am in that I can basically just like it was basically the same as if you wanted to change your name by deed poll or something, just like lots of forms and witnessing and things. Um, yeah, that's my experience, like specifically where I am. Yeah.
Thank you, Sophie. And thank you, X. Alex is asking, would you consider Gwendolyn to be trans representation?
Um, like well, we talked about this a lot in anything that's not out yet.
Yeah, enough
Yeah,
too.
yeah. So like the thing about Gwendolyn that like we've talked about, this is a preview, I guess. If you think about a lot of the trans or like gay whatever representation that people talk about in the Souls games, a lot of it's not like overt representation. It's more like you could view like it's something to latch onto. Like a good example is like Gascoigne and Henrik. Um, that like a lot of people like read as a gay couple because it's in like it's maybe not intentionally in there, but there's enough there to latch onto. And like the Maria Adeline stuff's another example of that. Like it's but with Gwendolyn, it's like Gwendolyn is this weird mess because it's like Gwendolyn sort of ended up the way that Gwendolyn did because it's just this sort of like it's like a Jenga tower of like weird things has been built around this character that ends up kind of maybe like not intentionally, but making them into like this sort of trans or gender fluid character. But like the game itself goes back. Like if you want to talk just about like what's written in the game, it goes back and forth constantly. It can't decide. And I know a lot of people who like they really hate Dark Souls 3 because of what it does. Because Dark Souls 3 is the like Dark Souls 1 is like extremely vague. And then Dark Souls 3 sort of like puts it in black and white. Like Gwendolyn is like called he and like played the role of a woman and they did it using like a ring that reverses your actions. And I know a lot of people who like um they think that's a terrible ending because prior to that it's like the vagueness of it allowed for all these different readings of like what Gwendolyn like I know a lot of people who don't read Gwendolyn as trans at all read Gwendolyn as like intersex or something or as like fluid or as like completely androgynous or something like that. And yeah, I feel like I mean something we brought up a lot with Dark Souls 3, just not even Gwendolyn but in general, is like the degree to which you sort of start making everything very concrete. It started to push people away a bit. People who were more into because they liked the fact that it would suggest things but not really lock them down. And but yeah, like I that's how I would see Gwendolyn, but like other people wouldn't. I know like trans people who don't either because they're just like, well, it says here Gwendolyn did this thing, and that's. I think it just depends on who you are.
Thank you, Sophie. Cuckoo is asking, I've been curious about this for a while. I have a trans friend who can't hear their old voice without getting a bit triggered by the past. My question for Sophie is, does hearing your old voice upset you?
No, it's actually more the other way around because like I suppose like the thing that had always bothered me is like I didn't like standing out. And I feel like the old like this guy, hi. Um that like nothing about that guy stood out. So like it didn't strike me as something that would get any negative attention. So yeah, like I feel a bit more like on edge now, hearing myself than I did back then.
Well, thank you for your honesty, Sophie.
That's alright.
Graham Stoner asks, I'd certainly like to hear Sophie's take on why it's taken so long for trans visibility. And why did we not have this cultural drive for trans rights decades ago?
Alright, so like we did have like visibility of a sort, but it was very like salacious. They were basically like the reason it took me kind of until my 30s to figure it out is that like I knew what trans people were and I knew they existed, but I was only really aware of like two sort of models, two sort of ways, and one was a very sort of salacious like sexual thing, which would be these like kind of sensationalist articles you get in tabloids that was like um like the just like really sort of like trying to be kinky sort of profiles on trans women who were usually like a sex worker or a model or something, to be like sexy lady but they're really a man sort of thing. And like I've mentioned this before, but like I'm like not remotely sexual. I never have been. um and so like that never kind of crossed my mind as like, well, this isn't me. And the other one was like um people who were like extremely firm from a very young age, and it was like a cross to bear sort of thing. Like I have to do like this is like a problem. It's the sort of medicalist view that's like this is a problem that I have, and I'm going through like HRT and SRS and everything to fix the problem, and I'm doing that only because the alternative is dying. And those are the only two models I was aware of. And over time, like I didn't really fit into either of them because I wasn't firm from a young age, and I wasn't like very sexual or anything. So I'm like, well, obviously this isn't me. And what basically happened, this is not the only thing that happened, but something significant that happened, is that they changed the way in which gender dysphoria was diagnosed. They changed like basically the diagnostic criteria, and that opened it up to basically like, yeah, people who were not. It was not a case of like, it was not a case of like the same thing happened with like a lot of the sort of. I remember the night, like in the 90s, there was a big explosion of like articles about lesbians, but it was always presented as like something that was kinky and something that was essentially a lifestyle choice. And rather than like this is like just something that people are. And I mean, it was kind of the same thing where it's like the way it sort of gradually relaxed and it turned from like something salacious and sexual or something that was like, if I don't go through this, I'll die, versus like this is just a thing that people are. That was sort of like a big part of what drove like I think increased visibility.
Thank you, Sophie. There's an interesting documentary on Netflix called Disclosure Trans Lives on Screen.
Is this a
And
question or are you talking?
no,
Okay. No, sorry, I was wondering.
Oh, because something you mentioned made me think back to this documentary. It's
Yeah.
basically like a film that shows how Hollywood depicts.
Oh God. When was this made?
Oh, it was made in 2020.
Oh, okay, that's fine. I was thinking like, oh God, and just thinking back to like Ace Ventura or something.
No, no, it was. It just. I think they actually addressed the problems with Ace Ventura as well in that movie.
Name one.
But yeah, it's a really interesting documentary. I think it was really eye
Yeah,
opening.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So the next question is by Jank.
Mm-hmm.
What video game or video game character has affected you the most?
So video games are like interesting in that this is like a really common thing that I've dealt with. I've seen other people deal with where it's like the ability to sort of project, the ability to like inhabit someone else is like a big kind of deal. If you're having problems with like your identity or problems with your body or something. So like Dark Souls, like Gwendolyn didn't because like to me Gwendolyn is just like fashion goals, not. But I know people who really attach themselves to Gwendolyn and like um. But like we've talked about Bloodborne, it should be out already. The one where we talk about like Bloodborne, sort of like I think specifically the reason it appeals to certain people is that like it gets its claws into them because it's about like things going like sort of the vulnerability of your body that like all these things can go wrong with you. It's a game in which like, and this is specifically even what they said. This is not like me projecting, but like they specifically said the reason we got rid of armor and the reason we gave everyone all this long flowing cloth is to make you feel vulnerable, to make you feel like you're not solid, to make you feel like anything could just cut through you. And that combined with like yeah, everything else that was going on and like the way that like you have to sort of like open yourself up and allow things to like, you know, like break through you and change you and but at the same time like the things that you're changing into are things that are always kind of inside anyway. Um yeah, this notion of like I'm sort of the thing that happens like with Bergenworth in that where it's like I'm gonna search or Adeline, where it's like I'm going to search and search and search like deep inside myself for something, and then what I find is horrifying, and it sort of destroys you. But then through being destroyed, you become something else. Like that's sort of very powerful. But weirdly, like something that came up recently, because I've been watching a guy. Um, there's a guy I watch who just does Final Fantasy VI randomizers, which is an extremely niche thing. He's only got 350 subscribers, and he has no idea who I am. But I watch him, and like Final Fantasy VI was kind of interesting to play as a preteen when that came out for me because um a lot of like RPGs they were just like about a character who has to get stronger. Like I've got to get even like 7, which is like very very gay and is about like Cloud being like a vulnerable fuck up. But like 6 is really interesting because 6 is like um the character's motivation, like it's not I've got to get stronger to get revenge on someone. The two there's not like the way it's structured, there's basically two sort of like point of view characters in the two halves of the story. And they're both women. And the point of view that they both have is basically like um one of them is worried that like she's never going to fall in love with anyone, and the other one is worried that like she's unlovable essentially. And just that like in a genre that up to that point my only experience was like you level up to beat a dragon who is strong. It's almost like that was incidental, and you're having this stuff that's just like yeah that sort of hit me hard as a child, and like I still have a lot of affection for that game, even though it's massively dated, and there's a lot of like stuff in there that is bad, I think. But yeah. So yeah, those things, and like just like anything where you could make a character, like that's always important.
Thank you, Sophie. The game that affected me the most is
Yeah,
Fallout 3 because it's the best game ever made,
that's true.
and I love it very much.
Not even New Vegas, just three.
Yeah, New Vegas is okay.
That's the most controversial thing anyone's going to say tonight.
Oh, I should tweet it. My
Nothing
legendary
else
tweet.
I say is going to make more of an impact than Fallout 3 is good, New Vegas is okay.
Joe asks, can you elaborate on the trans or particularly gendered themes in Bloodborne and the Soul series as a whole?
Well, good news. I think we already did. Because Sin and I recorded two things already about basically that, about like my feelings about them. And one should already be out. And then another one should be out a little bit after this because we've recorded both. But yeah, like I think like the takeaway from both of them is like if you look at the fandom, by which I mean the people who are still very, very attached. Not the people who played it and just like did something, like people who just played it or who just do PvP or something. Like the people who are still churning out like fan art and magazines and cosplay and stuff. Um, it's overwhelmingly like women and like LGBT people. For a specific reason. Like there's a whole Reddit that's called Trans Souls. That's literally just like trans Dark Souls discourse, who we've been mentioned a couple of times. But like it's that sort of like prevalent.
Thank you, Sophie. So now let's move on to the questions on Discord.
Okay.
Princess Ship asks, how did Sophie get so goals?
um I don't know. I mean this guy was a um I like the honest answer is like there's something I've talked to Sin about like in private, and I mean like it's not that it's something painful to discuss. It just like felt self indulgent to bring it up on something other people were listening to. But it's like the reason that like I'm negative about this guy, right? I don't want people because wait for him to get in focus. God, the reason like I don't want people to think that what I'm saying is like, oh, this guy he's ugly, because I know a lot of people who kind of look like that, and I don't think they're ugly. But the thing about him is like I know for a fact that like the reason that I was like overweight and the reason that I had like very unkempt hair, the reason I had this like neck beard and everything, I know why those were there. And they were there because I was basically self-harming by doing that. Like the reason I was overweight for so like the reason that happened, um, it's because like every time I would think about like I wasn't like naturally that overweight. I was basically deliberately eating bad food as like self abuse because it's like I didn't want to sort of like have a body that functioned properly. It's like what's the point? There's a real like and like no one really saw my bedroom at that point because I wasn't on camera much. Like it was like a sty. It was just like crap everywhere. And like that's just because like I didn't want to live somewhere nice. I didn't want to feel happy. I didn't like, I didn't want to look after myself. Because it's like, what's the fucking point? And every time like anyone would say anything nice about me, I would get upset because it's like, no, you can't say anything nice about me. Like it has to, everything about me has to be bad all the time because if anything good happens, that's sort of like opening the door a little bit to the possibility of everything getting better, and I don't want to deal with that. I just want to sort of like give up. Um, so like that's kind of like why like I was like that. Um, and it's like how I look now and where I live. I'm sorry, how I look now. I just said I'm not messy, and then I elbowed a bunch of anime DVDs. But like the this because we're recording with Pen Pals tomorrow. But like the thing is like how I look now in the space I live in now and the things I do now. They're all things I wanted to do. That's sort of how I wanted to look, but I had to make it impossible for myself as like a coping mechanism if it's just like completely out of control. If you're just like a fucked up person, it's all out of your control, then you don't have to worry. It's like it's not something I can do anything about. I'm just like, this is what I look like, this is where I live. I'm like an unhealthy slob. That's my lot in life, and there's no point thinking about other things. Um And what happened, that extremely rapid like change that took place, was just me realizing like, no, I can actually move on. So yeah, that's why I like, and like some like the problem is like the damage I did to myself at that point, like the damage I did to like parts of my body, when I was like that. And also just like mental damage, and like, I was depressed for long periods and not working, so like financial damage and everything, like that's still there, and that's still something I have to deal with. Like I still have to deal with like the knock-on effects of like being like that for so long. But yeah, like that's what I'm saying. Like that's kind of like what happened, and that's why like, yeah, I don't want people to think that like when I look back at that guy and like dislike him, I'm just like saying, oh god, I was so fat, because it's not really the problem. The problem was a lot deeper than that. But yeah, the answer is like, I'm fucking poor and I do all my shopping. I don't even. There's this thing about me doing all my shopping at Kmart. And it's not even Kmart, it's the clearance rack outside Kmart. I'm that poor. So goals is just like picking three colors, making sure everything is those three colors and it just coordinates. But like I said, like Michaela's much better than me.
Thank you, Sophie.
Thank you, Sin.
Sarabite is asking, is Sophie upset if their dead name is dropped accidentally?
I'm not even upset if it's dropped deliberately. I straight up don't care. It doesn't bother me at all. But I know other people who like just like said like, no, like nothing prior to this can ever be mentioned because it's too upsetting. And there's not like, the problem is that there's a lot of like transphobic shitheads out there who find like one trans person who says, I don't mind blank. And they use that as almost like it's like rather than being like an individual thing, it's just like people who have learned to cope with it. And like it's nothing to do with like, I don't mind my dead name being dropped, because it doesn't. I'm just like tough enough to power through it. I just don't care. But I know people who really do care. And yeah, like I don't. Like I was watching something the other day. It was this like one of those stupid YouTube that's like, this is a documentary that's just me dragging up like 10-year-old e-drama. But it was one of those, and it was like, it was about this trans person, not Chris Chan, someone else, who was like, and then the narrator's like, you might think I am being transphobic by misgendering them, but here's a forum post they made in 2016 where they said they didn't really mind. And it's like latching onto that as an excuse just consistently it's just shit. So like I don't personally care.
Thank you, Sophie. Silverwing has a similar question. Does Sophie mind being called JSF?
No, well, no, this is the thing. The thing I mind most about JSF is I didn't like the channel very much. I didn't like the things I
What?
hated. I know, it's shocking. It's like I didn't like that, and it's not that like I don't like it because it's pre-transition. I just don't like it.
Okay, let me correct myself, Sophie. It's not shocking to me because you tell me that every day, but to people out there.
I think
Might
the
be
fact I abandoned the channel about 5 years ago to work with you should be a possible like clue that didn't like it very much. I didn't, and like I say, like it's not because it's pre-transition. Part of it actually is that it's pre-transition because like I'm fucked up at the time I made it. Like I think I said that a few times that like a lot of that just came from a place where I was like very very miserable all the time, and it's reflected in the work, and I don't think it's very good.
when are the new episodes of Bloodborne Up Close coming out?
The whole idea behind like those Bloodborne videos is like I would just make 12 videos ever and
Mm-hmm.
I'd put them online and I'd leave. And
Mm-hmm.
the thing is like talking to you over and over again for years and years and years, like we covered everything I wanted to cover. It just took longer. And it's spread over more videos, so it's just like whatever. Everyone who's on the channel now likes listening to us talk.
Well,
So
we did get a comment fairly recently being like, I was away for a year. I come back. That girl still has an annoying laughter.
that's the biggest change in the last year, yeah.
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 Sir Camquad is asking, did Sophie have a history of making female character in games?
Yes.
Thank you, Sophie. Taylor is asking, what are your thoughts on how gender is approached by different from games, or just more recent ones?
We did 2 videos on it that'll be out soon.
Thank you, Sophie. Saint Hound is asking, I would love to hear Sophie talk about the difference between sexual orientation and gender identity.
All right. So this is kind of like this is getting into when I said at the start, like, "Hi, I'm a doctor," because my understanding of things like gender and sex and things is not necessarily like the way that I think a lot of people do think about them. So like the common way I see it described, and I see it described less this way because like things are sort of catching up, but like if you think of like academia is up here and everything's sort of downstream from it, it takes a while to get there. So the way that I see trans people described is like they have a gender identity that doesn't match their sex, and it's like these two things are sort of like out of alignment. But and that's where a lot of like a lot if you see like transphobes, one of the ways they'll try to like make it seem like a feminist thing is they'll say sex not gender. Because the notion is like you have a rigid sort of biological sex. It's just like the subjective quality of your body. That's real. And then gender is basically just like a fiction that's overlaid on top of that. So the notion is like the way that they would describe it is like you have like a body that is either male or female, and the reason that trans people exist is that they see a social role, like a male social role, female social role, and they say, "Oh well, that's that's what I fit into, therefore my body is wrong." Um, but like the way that we talk about it now is to actually like collapse sex and gender back down again to say like it was kind of always just social. Which is it's like kind of a lot to get your head around, but like if you think about like the human body having like a sex, it doesn't really have like a sex. It has a bunch of sexual characteristics from which a sex is derived. So like genitalia is the obvious one. Like when you're born, they inspect the genitalia, but like that's one trait, and it's not even the full trait because genitalia has an external and internal component to it. So you have like external genitalia, you have internal genitalia, you have secondary sexual characteristics like breasts and like different kinds of like body hair patterns, facial hair patterns. You have like different kinds of like bone structure around like the brow and the jaw, like the waist hip ratios, things like that. You also have like your hormone levels. You have your chromosomes. You have like just internal reproductive parts that all sort of like all these things combined together produce like a sex, but they're not always going to line up. there's actually an enormous amount of diversity in the kinds of people you get. And this is why we talk about people being like assigned male or assigned female, because there's a lot of like real world examples of this. Like you can what one story I use when I'm teaching, when I taught this, is that there's a newspaper article, and it's from a British newspaper, and it's basically like um, man goes to hospital, discovers he is a woman, and it's like what? So like that news story is it's that's not really what happens, but it shows what I mean. Where like this guy, he was a guy in his like mid 40s, and he was suffering incredible pain in his crotch, and he was urinating blood, and he went into hospital for it, and they found out that he had a uterus.
Oh,
So
wow.
he was like, yeah, he had a uterus that was like, it was behind like where his penis and testes were, and it was coming out. It was like, it was basically like menstruating through his urethra. Yeah, and then you have like, it's actually fairly common with female athletes. It's something that comes up a lot where like they will have XY, like they'll have like Y chromosomes, because it will give them like it'll give them like a different kind of physique. Models as well, because like if you have like certain mixtures of sexual traits that aren't entirely in one box, like you can have models who are very, very like tall and angular with very broad shoulders. um you also have like, there are people who like they're assigned male at birth because they're born with like external male genitalia, but then during puberty, because of their chromosome makeup, they move toward like what we would consider to be a female puberty. Like their hips go out, their shoulders don't really grow, they get breasts, they don't really grow much hair. You also have like there's actually it's a sort of it's a place in the Dominican Republic where this happens a lot. It's because it's genetic, because it's passed down among the people there. But you can be assigned female because they see like a vaginal opening, but that actually turns out to be there's a penis and testes in there that's like you would call undescended. So you have these people, and they're raised as girls. Everyone thinks they're a girl till they're about 13 or 14 when puberty starts. When puberty starts, the genitalia literally like it just sort of like comes out. It descends from inside of them, and so like what I'm getting at here is like there's not actually a single objective trait you can look at and say like this person is one thing or the other. The other thing I would really, this is something that's like it's very very it's one of those like oh shit moments, because you do it all day and you don't think about it, but then when you realize you're doing it, it's like oh hang on a minute, because the way that people talk about like this person's a man, this person's a woman, I know because of their genitalia. If you think about how many people that you see every day and interact with every day, depending on where you live, like where I see thousands and thousands of people every day, and like talk to them and everything, you're capable of discerning whether that person is male or female when you talk to them, mostly. Um,
Without ever seeing their genitalia.
yes, exactly. You don't inspect people's genitalia when you meet them. You don't, as a
Yeah.
general rule, people don't walk around naked. But you're entirely capable of like gendering people without knowing, without actually having physical evidence of it.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's like so the process of like assigning gender to people is significantly more complex than like you initially think it is, but you're just used to it, so you don't think that you're doing it, you don't think other people are doing it. So the reason I'm setting up all that is because if you then go back to sex, so we're talking about like, okay, the human body has these like sexual traits, but when someone is, you know, exhibits traits that are both male and female, instead of treating that person as like this person, like, okay, they have male and female traits, they're actually treated as like, well, they have to be one or the other, so which is it? This is actually like when children are born with genitalia that's quote unquote ambiguous. They will try to like fix it.
What do you mean by ambiguous?
because this is the important thing that like I think a lot of people, particularly at TERF, sort of don't want to deal with is like when you're conceived, when you're like a little blob of cells, you don't actually have, there's not like a boy girl switch in there that goes in one way or the other as soon as you're conceived. You actually have to develop down one or two lines. And you develop down those lines by all these different enzymes interacting as you're developing in the womb. And you don't really have a set sex for a while. You have to like eventually go down one of two paths. But because it's a developmental process, because all of these things are happening, this is why what I was getting at before, that like you can end up with a mixture of traits. Like even though like humans are sexually dimorphous, but you can still end up with like a bit of one thing and a bit of the other thing or somewhere in between. And like so like if you think about like genitalia, you can have you can end up with like a like something that's like in between. You can have like a like I mentioned, like my example of like from the Dominican Republic, where it's reasonably common within some communities that you can have like it's like a penis, but it's inside of the body, so it looks like a vagina, but then the penis comes out. Or you can have like an extremely large clitoris that looks like a penis and kind of like almost sort of like, yeah, like that's what I meant about ambiguous genitalia. So like what's happening is people like that, people who are in between, people you're unsure about, you still have to fit them into one of two categories. You still have to say it's person male, it's person female. So that's what we mean when we say that like sex is a social construction, sex and gender are the same thing. Because the notion that there are only two sexes and it's very rigid, and it's just like a fact that there's two sexes, that's something that we've decided on and we have to impose in opposition to what we're actually seeing. So that's sort of like, yeah, that's kind of what I'm getting at when we say like sex is a social construct. It's not saying that like, like you don't like your reproductive organs don't exist or something. It's saying that like humans are sexually dimorphous, but the notion that there is like a singular objective facet of the body that's called sex is not true. It's always a series of traits, and the traits do not always line up. And the notion that like there are only two sexes is completely in opposition to the way we understand human biology. But we force it into that category anyway.
Very cool, Sophie. Thank you.
I am very cool.
Cosmo is asking, Sophie, how long did you know you were trans? What experiences made it clear to you, and what inspired you to embrace it?
I guess like going back to the first question, I think it was the first question about like my I grew up at a time when like the visibility was there, but it was very kind of like there's two categories. And I was thinking like that's kind of me, but I'm also not that person. So I shouldn't be on like what actually pushed me over the edge. That sounds bad. What pushed me over the edge actually is like I'd mentioned before, like there were just like I was trying not to look after myself. And I actually had like a scare that happened where I had basically passed out in 2016, I think. And I don't know why it was, but it was obviously something was wrong with my health. It may have been like a pre-diabetic blood sugar thing. I don't know, but I was extremely unhealthy, and I actually passed out at one point. And I started making more of an effort to sort of like push back against that. I'm like, or maybe I actually don't want to die. And one of the things I did was I had always been very, very hairy, like you remember that. And I'll just show off there. Hi. That like I had I'd ordered what was basically a home laser kit. It was like a home hair removal thing, and I started to use it to get rid of some of the thicker hair on me. And it worked. and the hair started to was like around there, and it started to fall out. It was like I was shedding, and that's when like I mentioned, like there's like a door sort of opens up that you didn't want to deal with, and the door opened up, and it's like, okay, you can get rid of that. And then it's like, but you know for a fact that that isn't going to make anything better because this is a symptom of something else. It's not the cause. And you need to like go deal with it. Like that was sort of like that was like what pushed me over, I think, was like starting to get better and realizing like if you want it, like it's good that you're getting better, but you getting better is not actually going to fix the problem because you know where the problem is coming from. And it's coming from an identity issue. It's coming from how you're perceived.
So let me ask you a question. How was your transitioning experience overall? Like, what were your ups and your downs, your good moments and, tough moments?
Well, the thing is, it was mostly during COVID. So I was in this weird position where it's like I just didn't see anyone for 2 years because I was locked down. So um, I was in a position where like during during my transition, I lost about 30 kilos, which is about 60 pounds. So I had a lot of very baggy clothes, and that like I still like was Richard for quite a while. I just wore very baggy clothes everywhere. Um, it was something that like I basically didn't like. I tried not to look at myself while I was doing it. I'm just like just focus on like fixing things, and then you can take stock of where they're at in like a year. So it was just a case of like got to deal with that, and so basically just like I was thinking about it all the time, but not looking. Um, and like I think if you look back at like some of the older things that I'm on camera, I actually have like just massive like red welts all over here because I that's just from hair removal. Because like unless you have like extremely thick terminal hair, it's very hard to get across to people how hard it is to get rid of. Because like um you can't shave it because it's so thick that if you shave it you just have like black and red dots all over you because there's no way to like it's like wire, it's so thick. And I just had to like every day just like zap myself. I've got like tweezers and just pulling things out over and over. It was like a really fucking long process. And the thing is like I did it, and like I'm lucky in a sense that like I had fairly soft features to begin with. And I had long hair to begin with. So most people I think didn't really notice initially. But yeah, like the moment I realized things were changing is like around bit over a year in. I was it's actually I have a friend over the road who was with his mum, and I was delivering her cookies because I'm like that. And I went over to give her stuff, and she didn't recognize me. She hadn't seen me for like 18 months, and like friend of mine also like she was showing her mother like some photos of her friends, and I showed up when her mother said, "Oh, who's she?" I was like, "Oh." Um, so I just sort of like I disconnected, and I just sort of let it happen, and then eventually I realized people were calling me like the other day I was at the supermarket, and they said, "Can someone help that lady over there?" And I wasn't even like trying particularly hard. I wasn't in makeup or anything. I was just like wearing my like grotty Kmart clothing, and I was just one day people just started calling me she, and I was like, okay, fine. I didn't have to prompt them. But yeah, I just basically like dress sort of androgynous. I called it the plausible deniability look. I think I showed you a couple of times where it's just like I'm wearing some clothing that's sort of baggy, and I don't have any makeup on, but I have kind of like prominent. But maybe you'd think it was pecs, and I just sort of like dress sort of androgynously, and like I dress to like flatten myself out. It's like I don't my body was just sort of like a line. Like you couldn't sort of tell. Like you couldn't see any curvature, but also my shoulders weren't very broad and my hips were not noticeably narrower. So it's like I just sort of looked like a stick figure a lot of the time during it, and I just kept up with that for a while. And I was sort of like I mentioned about like dead naming and stuff. Like I was fine if people called me like sir or something in shops. It didn't bother me. So like I just sort of like I just wrote it out, and like it was I mean it was good because like I basically just got better. That was like the most important part.
Yeah. So let me ask you something else.
Okay.
Um, did you have any, let's say, unsupportive reactions from your friends and family? And if so, how did you deal with them?
Sin, you know the answer to this. Um, well, okay, like the thing is, I didn't tell any friends or family until a very long way into it because like before, like I had been a wreck beforehand, like I'd been all over the place, and I realized that like I was not going to go up to them and say like, "Hey, guess what?" Because they'd just be like, "Oh no, this is just another like you're still completely messed up. This is just not going to work at all." This is just you're just like reaching for something you think will help you. That's what I thought they would say, and so I didn't tell them for a year. And basically, I just went like, all right, you know how I got much better, how like I got on top of things, and like my physical and mental health really improved, and like I'm in control of things now. Um, the reason that happened is because of this, and I won't say who specifically, but like I said it to like some people, and they were just like, "Okay, I never quite thought of you as that, but I can't argue with the evidence." Um, which I thought was like that's like a reasonable reaction to it. That's like, okay, well, you got better. Um, you were very sick and very depressed, and um, you were like you had no idea what you were going to do. You were sort of like spiraling out of control. That's actually really common. I know a lot of people just describe themselves like I was kind of self-destructing beforehand, and you were like upset all the time, and you were self-harming and stuff, and now that's gone. So like, sort of putting to one side that like I would never have thought this was going to happen. It clearly did help if it's been this long. Um, and then some people were just like, well, I don't think so. And they're just still saying, I don't think so. And, I just sort of have to be like, all right, because I'm not going to change their mind. Because that's just how they.
To be clear, none of those people are me.
No, you were just like, yeah, I knew. You were like, yes, of course. You were just like, bitch, yes, I was waiting for you to figure it out, as were several people. I mean, like, the most negative reaction we got was from people we hated anyway. No, that's really important because, like, a big part of why I didn't like the JSF channel was that a lot of my followers were dickheads. A lot of them were these, like the aggressive, like, argumentative, kind of like Reddit, 4chan, like, gamer bro types who I did not want anything
Debate
to
me.
do with. Debate me. Yeah, and I was getting like, oh, this dude, why didn't you debate me about the profaned cap? I was like, because I don't fucking care, because it's not real. After I started working with you, they got really angry.
Oh,
And they
yes.
were, they were coming up with all of these theories about, because they can't comprehend, they're like a robot that doesn't understand friendship. And doesn't, it's like you feed them love, like, it's irrational, I am self-destructing. Because they couldn't grasp why I was talking to you.
Yeah.
Because they like, well, it had to be that like I had no self-esteem and you were somehow like blackmailing me, or like I was desperate to have sex with you, and this was like a really long game like flirting thing, even though you had a boyfriend, and it was just ooh. And there was a thread about us on Reddit, on the Girl Gamers Reddit, that was just like, it was someone lamenting that the Dark Souls community is so toxic and so aggressive, and I don't feel like, in like, as a woman, I can't go there because I get like patronized, I get yelled at, I get mocked all the time. It's like very, very argumentative, and I hate that that's happening because I like the games a lot, but I don't have anywhere to go. And then someone immediately recommended, "Oh, this is the only good place. You have to go here because this is where you go." No, it's true, and it's like, um, yeah, the only people who like, it's a good it's a good like filter, because it's like, no one shitty is going to hang around.
Thank you, Sophie.
Thank you, Sin.
Shuk has a question. Have you ever experienced game addiction or noticed that your general mood or energy has improved whilst away from a game you enjoy?
Something that like, this is like going back into like my experiences, but like, the thing about video games is that they become something that like you can feel like you've accomplished something in them. And it's a way of getting away from stuff. So like, when I was like really depressed, I did have, I think, what you could term like game addiction. Not because I was necessarily addicted to the games, but because like, it was just something to do to like take my mind off everything else. And I found like I don't have that anymore, is the thing. Like, I have a friend who like, he was during a period of life where he was very depressed, he just played World of Warcraft like every single day as a means of getting away from. And it's like, he wasn't necessarily like, he wasn't addicted to World of Warcraft. It was just like, if I play World of Warcraft all day, it blots out everything else. And that was kind of my relationship with a lot of things too. But like, our friend Dahlia, who is like also trans, this is sort of heavy, but it's something that she's talked about openly on like other stuff. So it's not, I'm not like revealing things about her that are private. This is something she's very open about because it's like part of her story. That she got into Souls games when she was in rehab for a drug dependency. And like, it was sort of the same thing, but it was positive because it was like having this thing to do. Like, it gave her something to focus on because she was in this like kind of hazy state. And it's like, if I just get up and I like play this thing, and then like I've gotten through it, and it's like, I can do things. It's like a task to focus on. But in terms of like addiction, I don't think I've never really been addicted to a video game as anything other than a means of escape from something else. That the problem is, having dealt with it, I don't care anymore. I used to play so much Fatal Labyrinth. I haven't touched it for years.
Well, good for you, Sophie. I, for one, am addicted to all the Fallouts.
I noticed. I noticed.
If I started to play a Fallout, I can't stop.
No, but you know what I mean, because it's like, if you were depressed, you can imagine what that would be like. Because it's like, oh, I can just zone out, and I feel like I'm doing something. I kind of am doing something, but I don't have to cope with like anything around me. I don't have to deal with it. And like, just in general, like, I feel like, I feel bad for a lot of people, like my sort of like high school friends and stuff, who end up in states like that, because I can sort of tell that like, um you're doing this because like you're depressed, but you don't want to talk about it, and you sort of don't want to go and like, as an escape. Yeah, that does. I guess because like, having lived through that, like, I don't get super judgy about people who play video games all day in like depression pits, because I understand like, it probably is coming from, you actually are like genuine. This is an expression of like, you actually have like, there's something that you need to address. It's not that you're just a slob. It's that there's something that you need to address. Yeah. So I feel like, kind of like, bad for people if they're clearly not having a good time. and it's an escape from that. Yeah. But like I do this, but I realize I do that now with shopping. I've become such a stereotype. Because no, now when I'm depressed, I just look for cheap clothes on eBay.
And Sophie, if somebody wanted to help with your shopping addiction for cheap clothes on
Don't
eBay,
don't enable me. No, there's all these out there. Like this was like how much is this? Like $5 or something. So this is like outlet place I keep buying crap from.
good, because you don't want to pay full price at stores. Stores rob you, so you only buy stuff on sale.
Yeah,
Ideally, though, you have to find like a nice church that has sales, or watch out
yeah,
for garage sales. Or they have like secondhand store, but you gotta watch out because some secondhand stores they charge too much, so you gotta find the ones that don't.
yeah. I mean, that's the expensive part of transitioning is rebuying all of your clothes.
Oh, yeah.
Because like God, this is okay, we're getting into like turf conspiracy shit, but they'll say that like transitioning was invented by Big Pharma because they want to make money off HRT medication. And like I can tell
Okay.
you like no. Okay, in case anyone doesn't know, the HRT medication you get, it's just like it is just birth control. Like Big Pharma is making as much money off me as they would like a cis woman of the same age who was on birth control. Like they are not making a mint off this. It's ridiculous. But where the money actually ends up going is rebuying all of your clothes and administrative fees. Like there's
Mm,
a I do volunteer resource creation at org, and like they have a fund, like you have to pay to be a member, and like they have a fund that is for like if anyone needs to just pay for like the administrative shit.
okay.
The other thing is like getting like hair removal done,
Hmm.
because like this is a thing that like a certain failed comedy writer is still ranting about. He's obsessed with like any trans women who have any kind of facial hair whatsoever. And like if you have facial hair, you'll know that like again, it's really fucking thick. Like it's some of the thickest hair you'll find on your body. And even if you shave it and there's literally nothing above the surface, you still see it a lot of the time because it's so thick. This is a problem that I had when I first started because like I one of the reasons I didn't come out for so long is I had a very thick beard. Like you can see it here. You can also see like how thick my chest hair was, and that was like I would shave. I would shave. I would actually buy like women's razors, the like super like fine ones, and cut so close to the skin, and it would be grey. Actually, like the skin was grey all around there because the hair is so thick you can just see it through the skin. And the only way to really get rid of that shit is through laser electrolysis, and that's really expensive.
Hmm.
Even a small area is like a fairly costly thing to do. So like that is actually where like the money goes. Like I calculated. I wish I hadn't, but I calculated how
Hmm.
much it cost me to transition, and it was like over $15,000.
Wow.
To just get to just get from like to get from here to here, and like it was just because I just had to like get so much like hair removal done. I had to do so much administrative shit, like just getting referred. Like in order to actually get access to HRT, I had to be referred to an endocrinologist. But then someone had to refer me to the endocrinologist, so I had to go through like a bunch of appointments with them. In order to get through to get to the endo, and then like I think I mentioned this before, but like part of doing the endo thing is I had to have an MRI
Yeah.
to make sure I didn't have like any cancers on my pituitary gland. And it's like all that, and like this is why waiting lists are so long, because yeah, I could have done that through like a public system, because we have a very good public system here. I could have done that through a public system. It wouldn't have cost very much, but it would have taken like the waiting list like years and years long. So I just said like, all right, I can either wait 2 years or I can go broke, and that's okay because I'm going to have a job soon. This is before COVID, and then COVID hit, and I was uh, broke during COVID. and I will never recover from that. But it's like, yeah, that's where the expenses are. It's not in like the actual like medication that anyone is taking. Actually, like I'll bring this up as well. This is another really good example of what I was talking about earlier with like bodies and sexes and stuff. Because like the reason I had to get an MRI is because the endocrinologist thought I might have cancer. And the reason he thought I might have cancer is that I got a blood test back, and the blood test said that my hormones were all over the place. They were up, down, up, down, up, down. I had like just huge amounts of like testosterone and estrogen just like swimming around in my system. And he was like, "Oh, this might be because you have cancer in your pituitary gland, which is the thing that regulates your hormones. He's like, you might have a cancer there. This might actually be why you're spiking everywhere." So I had to get an MRI for it. But like the fact is, even if I weren't trans, knowing that, I would still need to be on some variety of HRT anyway, just to keep that under control. Because there's just, I don't know what, I think it's to do, my understanding, I'm not an endocrinologist, my understanding is it's something to do with like my hormone receptors are just busted in my body. Like, even if everything's functioning perfectly, my body doesn't absorb hormones correctly, and then it overproduces to compensate. And like that was sort of that would I know. Like, oh god, this is actually getting like I probably should have mentioned this before, but whatever. Like prior to transitioning, my health issues that I had all the time. It's like, what are the problems you have? And it's like my weight yo-yos. I'm very moody, and I get acne breakouts. What does that sound like, Sin?
Sounds like you're going through puberty.
It also kind of sounds like I'm on my period.
Yes, it does.
Yes, because I ended up with like the symptoms that you would get if you had like hormone problems. Because it's like, oh, you kind of you come across kind of like you having your period, because you've got like your weight's up and down, your mood's everywhere, you have weird food cravings, you get like occasional acne breakouts, even though you're like well past puberty, and that happened, and it's like literally the only reason that that had never been floated before, because I had been on so many different medications, I had been to like psychiatrists and like doctors, and they'd all prescribe me different things, is that at no point had they thought of that, because it's like, well, that only happens to women. Clearly, you, man, would not be having hormone problems, because this is something that would happen to women during their menstrual cycle. You not having this. And yeah, just like if it had like just it never occurred to anyone that like this could have happened. And it just took that long to figure out, because we're just locked into this idea that like, well, you have to actually have like, if you don't have ovaries, this can't be a problem for you. Yeah. So I mean, stuff like this happens all the time.
I can attest to the fact that Sophie has been in a much more positive mood since transitioning. I feel like a
Not even,
lot of apologies
yeah.
are owed to someone.
Oh, very, very. I gave them to you though. No, but like, not even since transitioning, since just like literally emailing the person to say like, "Hey, can I talk to you about this?" It was like, boom, like I just got better pretty much immediately. Like I went from eating like fries every day to eating steamed broccoli like overnight, because it's like, okay, I have a reason to not be sick now. Yeah,
What advice would you have for people who may be in a situation that you were in before you transitioned?
I would, like I said, like everyone is sort of different, I guess. I think like the major thing that held me back, I think, was it's this notion that like you won't ever be accepted. And I don't want to say that that's not always true, because obviously a lot of like I have a trans friend whose just parents just like hate her and they won't accept her at all. But like there's this notion that like it will never help, and it will never make you happy, and like it's just like a palliative thing. I think that one of our favorite failed comedy writers friends was like describes it like it's just palliative care for someone who's mentally ill, and even that was deemed not transphobic enough by the listeners. But like I think like what's happened is like it's just increasingly becoming, this is just a sort of person that exists. Like, all right, here's what I'll say. I was fucking terrified a year ago that when the trans video dropped, like our subs would go through the floor immediately, the views would tank, and there wouldn't be a channel in a year. And all of my worries were unfounded.
Thank you, Sophie.
Thank you, Sin.
Now we're coming to the end of today's evaluation, today's annual review.
I liked the structure. It gave me a lot of freedom to express myself. It's very two-way. I like this dynamic new approach to workplace evaluation. You also let me drink during it.
So, Dustin High IQ has a question.
All right.
And you know it's a good one because he has high IQ in his name.
Oh, that's true.
And the question is, when will we get a remake of the Edgar podcast? Sophie, do the outro.
That was the Snack Covenant episode 291, Trans Day of Visibility / Sophie's annual review. We didn't get to all the questions, but by the time this is out or around now, we actually did do a video on Bloodborne where I talked about a lot of the kind of queer readings of it, and my own experiences. So that'll be answered in that. So thank you to everyone who asked that question. But we sort of we have something out already, so that'll answer it.
Yeah, and we can do an AMA at some point as well, like a stream.
Yeah, I haven't done one of those for a very long time.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Sophie.
Thank you, Sin.
And thank you everyone for listening. And see y'all next time.
Bye.
Bye.